Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on sleep. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeff Farquhar. I'm an account executive with SSQ in the GTA. For me personally, this is a very interesting topic. I have a 6-month-old son at home, and a couple of extra hours of sleep at night are very important to me right now. Right now, it's Mental Health Week, and I think we can all understand how sleep disorders can have a negative impact on our plan members' mental well-being. What we're starting to see, though, is the indirect kind of causes of chronic illnesses. We're seeing insomnia being linked to diabetes even. It's really, really clear that sleep disorders have a massive, far-ranging impact on our plan members. We also have to be cognizant of the organizations that we work with and the impact that sleep disorders for their plan members have on the organization as a whole. Our first speaker, Dr. Charles Moran, has been investigating the impact and the indirect costs associated with sleep disorders and insomnia. And he's found that in a 3-month period, on average, an employee who suffers from insomnia is going to miss about 14 to 20 hours of work a week. That doesn't even take into account the impact of lost productivity for an employee who can make it into work but isn't fully rested. Today, we're going to take a look at how these sleep disorders impact organizations, what exactly they are, how we can treat them. But also, we're going to look at how we can support your organization and give tools for your plan members to really lead the life that they deserve. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to just remind everyone that your microphones are muted automatically. It's best to view this webinar on a computer rather than on a mobile device. We encourage everyone to use the chat function on the side of your screen for any questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll do our best to answer them. But for any that we don't have time for, we'll respond via email to all participants. So without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker. Dr. Charles Moran, PhD, is a professor of psychology and director of the Center for the Study of Sleep Disorders at the Cerveau Brain Research Center at Laval University in Quebec. He holds the Canada Research Chair in Behavioral Sleep Medicine, and he has published extensively 7 books and 300 articles and chapters on sleep disorders, and more specifically on the epidemiology and therapeutic approaches to insomnia, including the popular book, Overcoming the Enemies of Sleep. He is the associate editor of the journals Sleep and Behavioral Sleep Medicine and is on the editorial board of several other scientific journals. Professor Moran has served as president of the World Sleep Society and since 2018 has been president of the Research Commission at Laval University. I turn the presentation over to you, Dr. Moran.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to SSQ for making sleep the topic of this webinar today. And it's a great pleasure for me to have this opportunity to speak with you about this topic. So I'll try to get to the first slide here in just a moment. So here's an overview of my presentation. I'll talk first about what we've learned about the associations between sleep and health over the last few decades in terms of research. I'll also talk about one specific sleep disorder, that is insomnia, and the burden of sleep disorders. Then I'll move on to summarize what we've learned since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on sleep and circadian rhythms. A great deal of research has taken place over the last year, and we've been part of that research. So I'll summarize some of our early findings. And then the last portion of my talk will be about what are the treatment options for sleep disorders, and again, with a primary focus on how to treat insomnia. First, we may ask the question, why does sleep matter? Well, I guess if we spend about a third of our lives sleeping, it must have some importance somewhere. But yes, sleep is essential to good health. It's one of the three main pillars for sustainable health. It is just as important as a healthy diet and exercising. We may not hear as much about sleep as we do about the importance of exercising and having a good diet, but clearly sleep is the third pillar of sustainable health. It plays a vital role for both physical and psychological health. It helps restores physical energy, consolidate new learning, so it's implicated in memory. It even cleans up the brain network circuitry at night. And we just have to spend one sleepless night to know how much we need it to remain vigilant the next day, and also for our own psychological well-being. And sleep is also critical to the immune system, so it enhances our resistance against some illnesses and contributes to longer life expectancy. Before I move to address the association of sleep with mental and physical health, let me walk you through what's going on through the night when we are sleeping. So along the vertical axis here, you have this different sleep stages we go through. And along the horizontal axis, you have the hours of the night. So we begin the night sleep here. This person takes maybe 15, 20 minutes to fall asleep, then drops into stage one sleep. Stage one is really a light sleep that makes the transition from wakefulness to a deeper stage of sleep, which is typically defined by stage two. And even when our brain waves show that we are in stage one sleep, many of us would subjectively perceive to still be awake. So there are quite some discrepancies between the subjective perception of sleep and the objective measurement with the EEG, for instance. So stage one is really just a transitional stage to stage two, and then we move on to the deeper stages of sleep, stages 3 and 4. We remain there until about an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes after falling asleep initially, and then we gradually go back up to stage 3, 2, and then we have our first episode of REM sleep. REM for rapid eye movements, because when we are in that stage of sleep, which by the way is the dream sleep, so we have rapid eye movements. And we, in French, we also say paradoxical sleep. Why paradoxical? Essentially because our brain is hyperactive because of all the mental imagery, but our body is completely paralyzed. So that's the contrast. So this completes the first sleep cycles of the night. It takes about 90 minutes to 120 minutes to get through one cycle, and then we repeat that 2, 3, 4 times throughout the night. We see that we get the deepest stages of sleep in the first third of the night. This is particularly important for physical energy restoration, whereas REM sleep is more important for memory consolidation. So keep in mind, though, this is a typical night's sleep for a young adult who doesn't have a sleep problem, does not take medication, does not suffer from mental health problems or medical problems. All these different factors will impact on sleep quality and sleep duration. But the single most important factor is aging. Whether we like it or not, as we grow older, we are not sleeping as well. And we can see here the amount of time we spend across the different decades of life, amounts of time we spend in the different stages of sleep I just described. The darker blue area reflects the decrease in the amount of time we spend in deep sleep over the course of the lifespan, and we lose time in slow wave sleep or deep sleep, and this does not occur at 60 or 65 when we retire. You can see that it gradually takes place, but it becomes more noticeable in the 40s and the 50s, and that's when insomnia complaints are more frequent because our sleep is more fragile during those years. And the deep sleep that we lose is replaced by more light sleep and even time spent awake in bed. How much sleep do we need? That's probably the most common questions we are being asked sleep experts. And the short answer is fairly simple. Somewhere between 7 and 9 hours when we are an adult. But there are individual differences, and some people may need only 6 or 7 hours, 6.5 hours, and other people may need 10 hours. And as we age, we do not need less sleep. Oftentimes people think that sleep needs decrease with aging, but it doesn't decrease. What decreases our ability to sleep as much as we would like, or the ability to sustain sleep in a single episode throughout the night. And you can see that the biggest change occurs during the maturational years. So clearly children and teenagers need more sleep than adults, and particularly the teenagers, they often do not get the sleep they need for all sorts of reasons. Now, lack of sleep is not just in teenagers. It's a common problem in all segments of the population. A survey conducted, a large national survey run a few years ago revealed that nearly 60% of adults felt that they were short on sleep, and lack of sleep on women aged between 30 and 45 years old. Why? I guess we can speculate, but oftentimes it's a woman who have two roles, obligation with the family and professional responsibilities. And 2/3 of this sample also reported that they wish they could get better quality sleep. But somewhat paradoxically, 71% of the sample here said that when they didn't have enough time during the day, they sacrifice sleep first. So even if people don't sleep enough, don't sleep well enough, they often do not make sleep a priority in their lives. And not surprisingly, given those data, actually a quarter of the respondents said that they had taken a sick day in the past to catch up on sleep. So that's quite a lot of people, and nearly half said they had used some form of medication, prescribed or over-the-counter, the so-called natural products to improve their sleep. So sleep is really a big concern for many people. And here we're just talking about those who lack sleep. Now, soon we'll be talking about those who have trouble sleeping. But before we do move to insomnia, let's talk about some of the most common consequences of sleep loss. I think that we just need to have a poor night's sleep or an emergency in the night where we can't sleep more than 2 or 3 hours to experiment with those immediate consequences. And clearly, fatigue is one of those, reduced energy, sleepiness. People who accumulate a significant sleep debt over several nights really become drowsy during the day. And it's not just fatigue. They have to struggle to stay awake during the day. And naturally, lack of sleep will impair our capacity to sustain attention, to concentrate, and it will have an impact on productivity. It also has a significant impact on mood. It makes people more irritable, sometimes more anxious, more depressed, but clearly mood becomes more labile. It fluctuates when we are not getting enough sleep, and it decreases our tolerance to frustration. Lack of sleep is also associated with a number of medical and psychological problems. Lack of sleep has been associated with increased risk of obesity. At night, we produce different types of hormones, including leptin. And leptin is a appetite control hormone. If we don't sleep enough, we don't produce enough of that hormones, and it may make us eat more and gain weight. And clearly, sleep is involved also in blood sugar control, and that's why it's been associated with diabetes, and it's also associated with blood pressure, and particularly with insomniacs. People who have chronic insomnia are at greater risk for hypertension. I'll get back to that in a moment. But lack of sleep also have significant impact on public safety. It's been well documented, particularly in the hostile environments, that residents who are on call for long periods of time, 36 plus hours on call, at increased risk of making errors. And on the road is the same. So accidents occur more frequently on the road at night when our vigilance is at its lower. So now I'm going to move to talk about insomnia. But before I talk about insomnia, let me just say that there are multiple sleep disorders, and we often organize them in 4 classes, such as these here. We have first all the insomnia, different types of sleep, of insomnia disorders, people who have trouble falling or staying asleep. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we have people with hypersomnia, people who can't stay awake during the day. Oftentimes, these people have disorders such as sleep apnea and narcolepsy. And then the parasomnia refers to all those things that go bumps in the night, nightmares, sleep terrors, and so forth. And some sleep disorders are more related to our biological clock. So here we think of sleep problems we experience when we travel across time zones, such as jet lag, shift work, or phase delay sleep disorders. Insomnia is the most common of all these sleep disorders, and it may manifest itself in different manners, in different ways. So some people have trouble falling asleep at bedtime. Other people have no trouble falling asleep, but they can't stay asleep. And then some people can fall asleep easily. They stay asleep for a few hours, but then they wake up and they can't get back to sleep. So these people have what we call early morning awakenings. So these are the 3 classic symptoms of insomnia, and one does not preclude the other. So oftentimes people have mixed sleep onset and maintenance insomnia. And insomnia is not just a nighttime problem, it's a 24-hour problem. So typically people who have trouble sleeping at night also have trouble functioning during the day. And in fact, it's often those daytime impairments that bring people to seek professional help. It's when they can no longer cope during the day with their nighttime sleep problem and with the consequences of those sleep difficulties. Insomnia is more prevalent in women, and the ratio is about 2 to 1, whereas a problem like sleep apnea is more common in men. Insomnia is also more common in older people, in people who are on a typical sleep schedule, like the shift workers. but no one is immune. Everyone can suffer from insomnia at one time or another in life, and it's quite common. Insomnia disorder affects about 10% of the adult population. And if we add to this those who experience occasional symptoms of insomnia, then it's more in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% of the adult population who experience either symptoms or a full disorder of insomnia. Insomnia is often comorbid with other medical and psychiatric disorders. So here we take the data from a large survey that was conducted in the United States a few years ago. And when we look at people with different medical and psychological conditions, we can see that those who have insomnia also have higher rate of other conditions. For example, when we look at hypertension, there are twice as many people who have also insomnia in that group. When we look at coronary heart failures, it's the same, diabetes, obesity. And when we get to the mental health arena, we can see that there are 5 times more people with insomnia who also have a coexisting anxiety or depressive disorder relative to those without insomnia. So you might think, well, of course, insomnia is a symptom of anxiety and depression, and that's true. But this kind of data, which is cross-sectional, does not inform us about the cause or the consequence of insomnia. And in fact, it goes in both directions. If you are stressed out during the day or depressed, it's very likely to exacerbate or to produce sleep problems at night. And on the other hand, if you experience sleep problems night after night, this will increase your risk to develop a major depression, even if you have no prior history of depression. So it's a bi-directional relationship. And now there's a lot of longitudinal studies documenting those relationships. We often think also that insomnia is a kind of a situational problem. And if we don't worry too much about it, it will go away. In some way, it's true, but in many people, insomnia is a very chronic problem. And these are data that we've collected in our own longitudinal study throughout Canada over the last decade. A study run with over 4,000 people, and of those, there are 1,700 plus with insomnia when they enter the study. And we survey these same people every year. And you can see that of those who had insomnia at baseline, there was still 74% who had still insomnia a year later, 52% 3 years later, and 5 years later, there was still 42% who had experienced insomnia at each and every year of our study. So insomnia does not remit on its own in many cases. In some cases it does, but in many people it becomes a chronic problem. And the problem with that is that if you don't treat it, then you may end up with a second or a third problem. And the next few slides I present summarizes some of the findings from the epidemiology literature. There's a strong association between insomnia and work disability. These are data coming from Norway showing that people with chronic insomnia are at much greater risk to be on a permanent work disability compared to those without sleep problems. And this association remains highly significant even when we adjust for other coexisting medical problems. Same is true when we look at sick leaves exceeding 15 days over a 4-year period. This is highly associated with insomnia and still highly associated with insomnia, even when we make adjustment for coexisting medical or psychiatric problems. In our own study in Canada, we have looked also at the association between insomnia and absenteeism from work and reduced productivity. And we've divided the subsample among the good sleepers, those who presented symptoms of insomnia, and those who had a full disorder of insomnia. And you can see that regardless of how we looked at it, the numbers are higher for those who presented an insomnia disorder, followed by those with insomnia symptoms relative to those who were self-defined good sleepers. So this is very costly in terms of human resources lost because of the sleep problems. We've tried to quantify that. It's always a bit difficult, but I think that the main thing to retain here is that we've estimated that it costs about $5,000 a year for a person who has insomnia, and both in terms of direct and indirect costs. By direct, we mean treatments initiated for the sleep problems, and indirect costs are those costs associated with loss of human resources, either due to absenteeism or presenteeism. But by and large here, what was found is that of all the costs, about 90% are accounted for by the indirect expenses caused by reduced productivity and absences from work. And only 10% accounted for by the treatment initiated. So that goes along with the fact that very few people with insomnia receive treatment, and even fewer receive adequate treatment. So now let me summarize briefly what we've learned about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on sleep and circadian problems. As you might imagine, many people have experienced a worsening of their sleep quality. As I'll show you also, there's been a dramatic increase in the prevalence of insomnia and nightmares. And for some people, it has led to a significant shift in sleep schedule. Many people are going to bed later, and if they can't afford it, also they arise later in the morning, particularly those who are working from home. So this change in the sleep schedule has provided an opportunity for some people to catch up on sleep, particularly those who had accumulated a sleep debts. Well, they were spending less time on the road to commute to work and from work, and some people have used that to increase their sleep time. Some people have used that extra time to work more, though, but not everyone has actually gained in total sleep time, and even some people who had increased their time in bed, some of them have decreased their sleep efficiency, which is the ratio of time asleep over the amount of time spent in bed. So at the end, the sleep quality was decreased for many people. Just as an indication of how much sleep became a concern for many people with the onset of the pandemic last year. These are the number of Google searches for the word insomnia. And you have here kind of a base rate for the first 3 months of the year 2020. And this is the trend or the direction it took beginning mid-March of last year. So clearly, this is, it cannot be clearer than that, an indication that sleep and insomnia became a very prevalent concern for many people after the onset of the pandemic. And this was very much related to the death rates. And these are worldwide data, and we can see the same trend for US data. And we could probably say the same here in Canada. We've initiated a large international study, actually, soon after the pandemic last year, and we surveyed over 22,000 people in 13 different countries about sleep, but about other problems as well, anxiety and depression. And here you have the data for Canada, and you can compare with other countries. At the bottom, you have for the total sample. And here, this is the percentage of individuals with a score greater than 10 on the Insomnia Severity Index, which is a brief questionnaire. And a score of 10 and above indicates that a person has clinically significant symptoms of insomnia. And a score greater than 15 suggests that we probably have someone who meet the full criteria for an insomnia disorder. Here, these are people with probable anxiety and depression, depressive disorders. So look at those numbers. I told you earlier that about 10% of adults meet criteria for an insomnia disorder. Here it's 26%. For symptoms, I had said that it was an additional 20% maybe. So here it's 47%. So clearly, I mean, of course, you might say, well, this is not random sample, and you're right, because we've solicited volunteers to complete surveys on the web-based platform. But nevertheless, I think this is a clear indication of an increase in the number of cases of insomnia, anxiety, and depression. Our data compares to those of Brazil and the US, and these are actually the 3 countries with the highest rates of insomnia compared to all the others. The lowest were in Asia. China and Japan had the lowest rates, and in Europe, it was more variable across countries. We were kind of opportunistic with the pandemic, and we ran another study. And this study was conducted with those who were already involved in our larger epidemiological survey that we have been running for a period of 10 years. So we resampled a small sample in the province of Quebec last May. And we already had data from these same individuals. The last time we had surveyed them was 2018. So we solicited about 1,200 people, and about half answered the survey. So you can see these are the figures for 2018, because we use a kind of an algorithm to classify these individuals, and these are the data for 2020. So when we're looking at the prevalence rate, 218 and 220, so a significant increase. The incidence refers to the number of new cases. So of those who were good sleepers in 2018, there were nearly 1/3 who developed new insomnia during the pandemic. The typical incidence rate, that is number of new cases in any given year, is about 4%. So we have an interval of 2 years here. So we might have expected an incidence of 8%, but it was 4 times that high. So, and here we really have baseline data. Maybe the sample is biased in the sense that people with sleep problems are always more volunteer to these kind of surveys dealing with sleep. But regardless of how we looked at it, there was a significant increase in the prevalence and incidence rates of insomnia. Some additional data about the sleep in the pandemic time. These are data coming from Italy, which I find very interesting. And we have data for different groups of individuals. And I would bring your attention to those who were doing remote working, so working from home. Here, the white line reflects the typical bedtime before the confinement, before the lockdown. So these people were going to bed about 11:30 before the confinement, and it was delayed to 12:30 during the pandemic. And at the other end, we can see that they were generally arising a little bit before 7:30. And with the pandemic, they have moved that back to about 8:45. So clearly, a very significant shift in sleep timing as a function of the lockdown and also the working status. These are people who can probably change their sleep schedule a little bit more given that they don't have to commute to work. But look at students, the change in their sleep schedule from the that's the bedtime before during the pandemic, a rise time. I mean, they were rising about 10 o'clock during the pandemic. So really significant changes. And we can see also that these are Italian people. Clearly, they don't have the same sleep schedule than we do here in North America. They tend to go to bed later and to rise later, even in the pre-pandemic time. There are many determinants of sleep problems during the COVID-19. Certainly that stress and anxiety are big factors or were big factors in the first few months of the COVID-19 when we didn't know too much what was going to happen. A lot of us needed to make a lot of adjustments with regard to work, family obligations, schooling, social and leisure activity, more time spent indoors. So clearly, all those factors probably were contributing to poorer sleep during the time of the pandemic. Now, the last segment of my presentation will talk about treatment options for insomnia. So there are many different treatment options for insomnia. Some are more effective than others. Some are better validated than others. Some are more popular than others. I'll just start with the so-called complementary and alternative methods or approaches. These refers to herbal products, dietary supplements, acupuncture. They're very popular in Quebec and in Canada, but they are not very well documented or very effective for sleep problems. I think that the research is emerging and products, for instance, like valerian, which is the root of a plant, has shown some promising results, but really it's still very modest, and I would not jump onto this if I had significant sleep problems. Acupuncture is very popular, and now there's beginning to be some research showing that maybe it could be effective for some people, but for who exactly, we don't know. So clearly, this is not part of the mainstream of insomnia treatment. I'll talk more about those two class of treatment here and begin with drug therapies. And there are different classes of drugs for insomnia. When we talked about benzodiazepines here, we're referring to Ativan, Rivotril, temazepam, clonazepam, Valium is even a benzodiazepine. So all these belong to the same class of medication. Their difference is in terms of potency and half-life. Some have a much longer duration of action than others. And we don't want a drug that has too long a duration of action because it will leave more residual effects the next day. So an older person who would be taking a drug like Dalmane, not a very good idea because the drug has the person an older person takes longer to metabolize the different drugs, and that person never has the time to completely eliminate that particular drug. So if she is taking it night after night, then there comes a time that I wouldn't say toxicity, but almost. Certainly it leaves a lot of residual effects the next day, confusion, and may impair motor coordination. So I'm taking the worst scenario. They're not all like that. There are newer drugs or slightly newer drugs like Sublinox and Imovane who have only hypnotic effects. They don't have anxiolytic effects like the benzodiazepines. Some antidepressant drugs are prescribed because they have sedative properties. The antihistamines is what we find in most products that we get over the counter, that is without prescription, like Sominex or Tylenol PM. Essentially, is the same ingredients than what we find in Benadryl. So it make us drowsy, but it doesn't work very well for sleep or significant sleep problems, and sometimes it may even produce more side effects. So if someone has a significant insomnia problem and wants to use medication, I think they should talk to their doctor. Most of the drugs available on the market are quite effective in the short term, and I emphasize, underline short term. We should look at sleep medication as a rescue when we really have a hard time, we are under stress. So under those circumstances, it might be beneficial because most drugs, they are very secure compared to what we were prescribing many years ago. They help people fall asleep faster, stay asleep a bit longer. They decrease the number and the duration of awakenings. So these are the benefits. They improve sleep continuity and sleep duration. But many of those drugs also have an impact on the sleep stages, and many may decrease deep sleep, particularly the benzodiazepines. Less so with the newer drugs like Sublinox and Imovane, and there's a new one, Dayvigo, that has been on the market now for just a few weeks. But most of those drugs will produce some side effects, and these side effects will vary with a number of factors. And there's always a risk of tolerance and dependence. And the dependency is often psychological in nature. If you take sleep medication every night over a prolonged period of time, there will be a kind of a tolerance. You habituate the way you habituate to alcohol. The more you drink, the more you need to drink to get the same effects, if that's the reason why you drink. But with the sleep medication, that's a little bit how it works. And because it works so well initially, sometimes it's very difficult to stop taking the medication, and hence the dependency. When we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, we are referring to, this is a form of psychotherapy, a brief form of psychotherapy. It's usually implemented in the context of 4, 6, 8 consultation visits. And you can see the main components here and what they target. Poor sleep habits, habits that perpetuate the sleep problem. They will also target what goes up here between our 2 ears in terms of thinking patterns about worries and poor coping skills. And there's also an educational component. So all this put together works extremely well. And the benefits do not occur overnight. It typically requires a few weeks, but the single most important the most important advantage of CBTI over medication is its well documented sustained effects. So it's more durable over time. And I don't know if I have kept that study yet. So this is essentially what I've been doing the last 30 years, doing clinical trials, comparing CBT with medication, documenting the course of insomnia over time. But this is a study we ran some years ago, and clearly it shows the relative benefits of CBT versus medication versus a combined approach and the placebo. And here we were working with a small sample of older adults who had as their primary problems staying awake at night. So we looked at the amount of time spent awake in the middle of the night. This was before treatment. This is after 8 weeks of treatment. And these are the follow-ups 3, 12, and 24 months later. And you can see that all 3 treatments produce greater benefits right at the end of treatment than placebo. But the main difference is that those who were treated only with medication, you can see they went back to where they were at baseline. So the benefits were short-lived, whereas those who received CBT alone or combined with medication did better. But the best treatment was CBT. We might think that those who received the combined approach would capitalize on the short-term and quick relief from the medication and the long-term benefits from CBT, and most people do that. But oftentimes when we use a combined approach, we do not invest as much time in changing our sleep habits. And if we tend to attribute the sleep improvements to the medication, then when we take the medication away from you, then you're at greater risk for going back to where you were before initiating treatment. So many other studies have shown similar results since then. So key points here that I would like to re-emphasize is that sleep is an essential component of sustainable health. It is just as important as nutrition and exercise, and we should not underestimate the impact of lack of sleep and poor sleep, because it does carry a significant burden for the individuals, employers, and for society at large. And there are effective treatments for insomnia. Sleep medication is clearly not what we recommend as a first-line treatment, but under some specific circumstances, it can provide rapid symptomatic relief for acute insomnia, but it's not a long-term solution. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the treatment of reference for chronic insomnia. There has been many clinical practice guidelines published in the last 5 or 6 years, and CBTI always come first in the list of recommendation. And these practice guidelines are not published by psychologists. They're published by, organized and prepared by medical association and association of sleep medicine experts. So I will stop on this, and I will return in a few minutes to answer some of your questions. I think after Valerie will give her presentation. So for the time being, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moran. That was very interesting. For me personally, I think the relation of COVID-19 to sleep disorders is, really relevant right now, and also to see the stats was, for lack of a better word, impressive. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Valerie Fernandez, who's going to speak a little bit about how organizations can help their employees with their sleep disorders. Valerie has a degree in kinesiology from Laval University and has been developing and implementing health and wellness initiatives in the workplace for over 15 years. Ambassador certified by the Healthy Enterprise Group for the Healthy Enterprise Standard and Approach, she knows how to guide employers to adopt best practices in organizational health management for the benefit of their employees. Passionate, dynamic, and creative, she succeeds in mobilizing teams to achieve their health goals. She has led various training sessions and conferences in various organizations. I'll turn it over to you, Valerie.
Sorry, guys. Thank you, Jeff. I'm very excited to be with you today and to have the chance to present our very unique health and wellness offer. As mentioned by Jeff, this week is the Mental Health Week. And as Dr. Morin also underlined very well, sleep habits are very much in link with our mental health. For SSQ, acting in prevention has always been a priority, which is why since the merge between La Capitale and SSQ, a new vice presidency has been created, workplace attendance and wellness. Our goal in the expertise and coaching in organizational health direction is to offer expertise and coaching based on the best practices, solid evidence in health, workplace attendance, and disabilities and rehabilitation. And by always keeping in mind SSQ's values of proximity, proactivity, simplicity for our clients and our partners. So today I have the honor to present our national team of experts. This goal of offering, prioritizing prevention has allowed us to create a national team of experts and health professionals that is fully dedicated to support our clients in implementing health strategies and developing a health culture. We are a big team, a big national team that is a passionate group of people directed by Brigitte Marcoux, who is in industrial relations. Also, Mélina Lamarche, kinesiologist. Véronique Grenier, who is kinesiologist and also a human resource advisor. We also have a part of the team, Catherine Desforges, a certified dietitian, and Julie Politi, special projects and offer development. Our team of coaches, our team actually of experts coaches SSQ clients to implement all the necessary to support their employees' health. Our offer declines into 3 aspects and regroups now strengths of SSQ and La Capitale in organizational health. The first part of our offer is to put in place and implement health promotion and prevention strategies which for us is essential to workplace attendance and to the development of health culture in your organization. Our experts are present for each of the milestones, which means from the start of the idea to the creation of a plan of action which is personalized and customized to your needs and to your organization. All of which would include the 4 components that have proven to have an impact on employees' health, which are lifestyle habits, work environment, management best practices, and work-life balance. With the merge of SSQ and La Capitale, we are now able to offer our clients hundreds of tools, activities, and ready-made campaigns of various health-related subjects. The second aspect of our offer is coaching in workplace attendance. Here, our goal is to give the necessary tools to managers to be more comfortable to act in the disability process, meaning before, during, and after absence when returning to work. In the spirit of collaboration, our team offers guides, tools, trainings for the HR teams, for the managers, and also for employees. Finally, we have the Assistance Service Program, which aims to prevent absenteeism. There are 3 components to this program. A coaching service for managers is available to help them deal with difficult situations that they may have with their teams. There's also crisis support that's offered when needed. For example, in a situation where an employee passes away or an important restructuring of the company, no matter the nature of the crisis, a professional of the program can be available in less than 24 hours to help those in need. And finally, the third component of this program is a referral program that allows a manager to refer their employees to this service where he or she could have access to a health professional to benefit from support in physical or mental health. In relations with the sleep disorders, so what we've been talking about today, through this service, we can have access, employees can have access to an online sleep clinic that can be offered if needed. Sleep is essential to good health, to good mental health, but also physical health. We've seen that during Dr. Morin's presentation. If it's a symptom of an illness or the illness itself, it's important to take care of it. Dr. Morin mentioned that there's a high cost for organizations related to sleep disorders, more specifically to insomnia. And I wanted to bring up this next statistics that was very interested in that we thought says a lot. In Canada, results show that losses caused by workers' sleep deprivation constitute 80,000 workdays yearly. So it's very, very clear that poor sleep can affect a person's personal and professional life. Fatigue has an important impact on our actions, attitude, and intellectual capacities. Our work abilities can be affected, and as an employer, you can make a difference on your employees' quality of sleep. So today we want to present to you different ways that as an employer, you can make a difference in your employees' health. We have 3 different strategies to present to you through our offer, and that can help you support our clients. The first one, I'm sorry, I went a little bit fast on that. The first one is to implement a health and wellness program. The second, to educate employees on the importance of sleep quality. And the third, offer solutions, coaching solutions that are more personalized. So we'll go into detail into these 3 aspects of our offer. First of all, putting in place a global health program is essential to reach this goal. So sleep quality can be influenced by multiple factors. We saw that earlier, such as stress, poor work relations, and lifestyle habits. As a kinesiologist, I always relate to how physical activity, when practiced at an optimal moment, positively affects our sleep. Implementing global health initiatives that meet both employees' needs and interests must be the bottom line of your health and wellness program. Even if sleep habits are not specifically addressed, it will necessarily have a positive impact on their sleep habits. Our team of experts is available to help you implement the health prevention and promotion program. The second aspect of our offer is to educate employees on the importance of sleep quality. If sleep is a topic that employees want to hear about and address they want to hear about it, a specific plan of action is recommended and should be put in place. Raising awareness and better understanding sleep disorders can help all employees understand the importance of good sleep. At SSQ, we have a ready-made campaign that's called Good Night, Good Health, and that can meet our clients' needs to reach their goal with simplicity. And last but not least is to offer coaching solutions, where here in this solution, we have something that's more personalized and customized to the employee's needs. So the employees have access to this service. And as I mentioned earlier, through this program, they can have access to a virtual sleep clinic that would suggest a custom plan of care based on the improvement of light to moderate symptoms of insomnia. For more severe problems, as mentioned by Dr. Morin, cognitive behavioral therapy online could be very effective, and we can also have that service through this program. The benefits that employers can gain from an integrated approach are multiple and very well proven. Investing in health optimizes workplace attendance, reduces costs related to health problems, but investing in health also creates a positive employee experience and improves work environment. People's health, those of our clients and their employees, are our priority, and it's our team's mission. So we really hope that this webinar was very useful for you and it triggered the intention of making a difference in your employees' health. If you are an SSQ or a La Capitale client and today's webinar has convinced you to launch or even improve an already existing organizational health program, I invite you to contact your account executive to see how our offer can meet your needs and what your different possibilities are with us. So I thank you all for your attendance today, and I'll give the mic back to you, Jeff.
Thanks so much, Valerie. And also thank you to Dr. Morin for all of your help and hard work putting together this presentation, both on kind of the science behind the sleep and also on ways that we can help improve it. There were a few questions come in on the question or on the chat, so I will just read those out, and I think they're primarily for you, Dr. Morin, but Valerie, you can always chime in as well. The first one we have is, what is your opinion on watches like the Apple Watch or Fitbit for tracking and optimizing sleep?
Yeah, I think these are becoming or have been very, very popular and widely used. And I think that they are useful to increase our awareness of the importance of sleep, as they are to monitor our physical activity and to monitor our nutrition. So in that sense, I think they can be extremely helpful. But unfortunately, I think too many of those devices are commercialized before all the data is collected to show to meet the claims that they are making. So when I see a device that is saying, well, okay, you have to go to bed at this hour, to arise at this hour, and your best sleep is at this time of the night, I mean, clearly there's just one way to do that, and that's with the electroencephalogram. And even if the different devices are improving in terms of technology, they are using body temperature, heart rate, and even skin conductance to get a sense of what sleep looks like. I think sometimes the message is really not accurate, and we have to be careful about that.
So maybe use it as like a baseline, but
yeah,
to go further, it's better to speak to a professional.
Yeah, actually, I think so. But again, it's good to keep you on track, right, at least to make you aware that the sleep is important. So that is a good thing.
Thank you for that. Do you have any advice for people who work atypical schedules, maybe shift work, nurses, things like that, on how that can affect their sleep or how they can positively affect their sleep with it changing so often?
Yeah, well, there are some advices, but I tell you, us humans are made to sleep at night. There are some species that have a reverse sleep-wake cycles, but as soon as we start reversing our sleep-wake cycle, then we're up for some problems. When we're 20 years old or 30 years old, it's much easier to adjust. As we grow older, it becomes more difficult. But having said that, for someone who works the shift, the night shift, very important to get back home as soon as the shift is over in the morning and not do errands on the way, because our sleep system is still in a sleep mode during the morning hours until maybe about noon. But if you do all sorts of errands and activities in the morning after a night shift of work, and you get to bed at 12 noon, your sleep episode will be very short. Whereas if you go to bed, let's say at 7 or 8 in the morning, you'll be able to get maybe 5-6 hours of sleep, 7 perhaps. But you shouldn't try to force sleep in the afternoon. If you're awake, get out of bed, go to your business, and save an additional period for sleep before you go back to work the next night. Maybe take a long nap, an hour and a half if you can. Then I think that you will manage with that. And also, you have to protect your sleep if you're trying to sleep during the day when everyone else is up and running, particularly during the pandemic. So you have to protect yourself from daylight, from noise. I often recommend that people who are on that kind of schedule for a long career, they should build a bunker in their basement to protect their sleep.
You mentioned naps just now. What's your opinion on how naps during the daytime affect your sleep at nighttime?
Well, if you have accumulated the sleep debts because lack of sleep, not necessarily because of insomnia, I think it can be pretty good. But you have to limit it to no more than 20, 30 minutes. So,
Okay.
because I mean, the shift worker I was just talking about is a bit different. But if you take a midday nap, 20, 30 minutes is the best duration so that you don't have time to get into the deeper stages of sleep. If you get into that deep sleep, it's going to be very hard to get out of that sleep and the inertia that follows and resume your daily activities. So 20 to 30 minutes and before 3 or 4 in the afternoon. If you take it too late in the day or worse in the evening, it will have a negative impact on the next night's sleep. And that's why we discourage insomniacs from taking naps, because oftentimes they do it against their will in the evening, and that's the worst thing to do.
Okay, interesting. I laughed when I read this next question because this was my dad growing up. He claimed that, 4 hours sleep at night was all that he needed and there was no convincing him otherwise. I'm sure you've seen these claims and have seen research about it.
Yeah, we hear a lot about that, and we hear Gregory Charles who says he needs just about that, 3 or 4 hours of sleep. But I think that if we were following these people, probably we would find that they catch up on their sleep whenever they have an opportunity. So famous people who said that they were running on 3, 4 hours of sleep oftentimes would take a long nap during the day that would compensate for shorter sleep at night. But there are short sleepers, natural short sleepers, but it's more like 5 hours, 6 hours. Very few will be able to get by with less than 5 hours without paying some consequences sooner or later. But that may exist as well. These are really the exceptional cases.
I'm going to read this one word for word. It's an interesting question. I want to make sure I get it out. Would you say that the main cause of sleep deprivation is illness, or the cause would be the inability to go to bed earlier?
I would take the latter. I mean, lack of sleep is caused primarily by the person who is in need of sleep, just because they don't make sleep a high priority enough in their lives. So the best remedy for that is to make sleep a priority and reserve a block of 7 hours of sleep at night, and you do nothing else during that period, and you leave all the electronics away from your bed, out of reach throughout the night. Really, that's the main reason. If we're talking about insomnia now, we often think that insomnia is the same as lack of sleep, but it's not. I mean, there are many people who have severe insomnia, but they still manage to get 5, 6, sometimes even 7 hours of sleep, but they need to spend 9 hours in bed. Right. So it's very broken sleep. It's a sleep that's really not refreshing. And for this particular case, I would say that the primary cause of lack of sleep is not giving it enough priority.
I think we probably have time for 2 more questions. An interesting one that came in. What are your thoughts on the merits of CBD or cannabinoid gummies to help with sleep?
We don't have a great deal of research yet, but there is a lot of ongoing research. I think based on the evidence that we have now, certainly anecdotally, many people claim that it's been very helpful to them to get better sleep. I think that a lot of that depends also on the concentration of the THC and CBD, and one produce more of the euphoria and psychoactive effects, whereas the other is more of a relaxation type of effect. So that may play a role. And also there are some personality factors that will contribute to different effects. So at the end, we do not recommend cannabis for sleep problems, not at this stage, and certainly not for younger people who we don't know. I mean, what the risks are for those people who may be more prone to mental health problems. So I think that I'd be very cautious about that. But we know that it has benefits for people in pain and people who are in chemotherapy, and all of that may have a negative impact on sleep. So indirectly, it may be beneficial for that. And the last point I would make about this is that sometimes the benefits you get, as for alcohol, the first few nights you use it, they tend to evaporate, so to speak, if you keep using it night after night because of the tolerance that develops.
Interesting. I think the last one we have time for is there a way to eliminate your sleep debt? Once you've kind of accumulated this, is there a way?
That's the easiest one. That's the easiest one. The best remedy for lack of sleep is sleep. No, but I mean, I'm joking, but if you want to get over that sleep debt, you have to make sleep a priority. It's like when people come to see us with a sleep problem and they're so stressed out and they say they don't have the time to work on the CBT program, on the cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, then I can't do anything for them unless they make sleep a priority in their lives if they want to overcome this problem. If there's not enough time, then I can't do much for that.
Right. It's kind of like you have to put the work in, right? Like you can't just hope it goes away on its own.
Yeah, of course, it requires a good dose of motivation. It's so much easier to take a sleeping pill, but that works only for so long.
Well, that brings us just about to 1:15, which we said was a hard stop. So I don't think we have time for any more questions. As I mentioned, for any questions we didn't get to, we'll send out an email that responds to them all. Again, Dr. Morin and Valerie, thank you so much for your time today. Very informative, a great webinar, and I mean, clearly very important for plan members and for the organizations they work for. So thank you on behalf.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Have a great day, everybody.